Carman is a fascinating and complex figure in Celtic mythology, particularly within Irish traditions. Often regarded as a powerful sorceress, Carman's story is intertwined with themes of deception, manipulation, and the darker aspects of female power. While much of the mythology surrounding her is fragmented and often contradictory, her presence in Irish myth offers insight into the dual nature of Celtic deities, where figures embody both creation and destruction, good and ill. Carman is most commonly known from the Irish texts, particularly in stories like the Lebor Gabála Érenn, Book of the Invasions, and the Cath Maige Tuired, the Battle of Mag Tuired. She is typically depicted as a powerful and malevolent sorceress, a character who uses her magical abilities for personal gain, often at the expense of others. Some versions of the myth describe her as a figure who represents chaos and the uncontrolled, wild aspects of nature, traits often associated with female power in Celtic mythology. Her most notable and infamous story is tied to her role as the mother of the Fomorians, a race of monstrous and chaotic beings in Irish myth. The Fomorians were often depicted as enemies of the Tuatha De Danann, the gods and goddesses of Ireland, and were considered to represent the destructive forces of nature. Carman's union with the Fomorian king, Nectin, resulted in the birth of 3 sons, who would go on to play significant roles in various myths. These sons, however, were often viewed with suspicion and fear, as they were seen as embodiments of the forces of disorder and corruption. Carman's reputation as a sorceress, coupled with her association with the Fomorians, paints her as a figure of chaos and rebellion. She embodies the idea that, in the Celtic worldview, the boundary between order and chaos is fragile, and the balance of the world depends on the powers of both. While the Tuatha De Danann represent civilization, order, and prosperity, the Fomorians, with Carman as their progenitor, represent the wild, untamed forces of nature, with all their potential for both creation and destruction. One of the most significant aspects of Carman's character is her role in the mythology of kingship. As a figure of power and manipulation, she is often associated with the idea of sovereignty, but in a darker sense than other Celtic figures who embody this concept. Her actions challenge the established order, suggesting that power can be taken and used to subvert the natural balance. This idea is central to many Celtic myths, where rulers and heroes must constantly battle against the forces of chaos and destruction, represented by figures like Carman and the Fomorians. Carman's role in the mythological narrative also touches on the theme of fertility and birth, but in a way that is often destructive rather than nurturing. Her sons, born from her union with Nectin, are powerful but dangerous figures, and their birth represents a disruption in the natural order of things. The tension between creation and destruction is a constant theme in Celtic mythology, and Carman's presence highlights the potential dangers of unchecked power and the consequences of manipulating natural forces for personal gain. Despite her largely negative portrayal, Carman's figure is not entirely one-dimensional. In some versions of the myth, her actions are motivated by the desire for power, but also by a need to protect her children and secure their place in the world. This duality is characteristic of many Celtic myths, where characters are not simply good or evil, but instead embody a complex range of traits, making them more relatable and nuanced figures in the mythological landscape. In addition to her darker associations, Carman's presence in Celtic mythology may also be interpreted as a reflection of the archetype of the wise woman or the crone, figures often feared and revered for their knowledge of magic, nature, and the unseen world. In this sense, Carman represents a type of power that transcends the normal boundaries of society, a force that can either protect or destroy depending on how it is wielded. In summary, Carman is a figure of complexity and contradiction in Celtic mythology. As a sorceress, she embodies the untamed and destructive forces of nature, challenging the established order and representing the potential for chaos that lies just beneath the surface of the world. Her story serves as a reminder of the delicate balance between order and disorder, creation and destruction, and the way in which power, especially the power of the natural world, can both nurture and devastate. Through her, we see that in Celtic myth, power is never absolute. It is always in a state of flux, constantly shifting between forces that are both good and ill, constructive and destructive, and ultimately necessary for the ongoing cycles of life.